I want to tell you about two brothers. Same parents, same house, same neighborhood, same schools. One of them is worth $4 million today. The other one is still living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to cover rent, fighting with his wife about credit card bills, wondering why nothing ever seems to work out financially. Same starting point, completely different outcomes. And here's what got me obsessed with this story. When researchers sat down and interviewed both brothers, they didn't find differences in intelligence. They didn't find differences in opportunity. They didn't even find significant differences in how hard they worked.
What they found was this. They thought about money differently. Not just their attitudes, not just their beliefs. I mean the actual wiring of their brains, the unconscious patterns, the automatic responses, the invisible programs running in the background, programs that were installed in childhood and never updated. One brother's brain was quietly working for him every single day. The other brother's brain was quietly working against him, and he had absolutely no idea. Now, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it for a moment before you answer.
What if your brain, right now, today, has some of those same programs running? What if some of the financial struggles you've been experiencing aren't because you're lazy or unlucky or not smart enough, but because of specific, identifiable patterns in the way your brain processes money? Because that's exactly what the research shows. And more importantly, once you can see these patterns, you can change them. That's what today is about. I'm going to show you 7 signs that your brain may be wired for poverty. Not to shame you, not to make you feel bad, but because awareness is the first step to rewiring. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you're going to understand your own financial behavior in a way you never have before. Stay with me. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I want you to know something important before we dive in. This channel exists because I believe that financial struggle is not a character flaw. It is not evidence that you are less intelligent, less disciplined, or less deserving than people who have more money. In most cases, financial struggle is the result of invisible psychological patterns. Patterns that were often shaped by your environment, your upbringing, and experiences you had before you were even old enough to understand what money was. The research on this is overwhelming, and today we're going to walk through it together. Now, before I get into the 7 signs, I need to be clear about one thing. Having these patterns does not mean you are broken. It does not mean you are destined to struggle. Every single one of these patterns can be identified, understood, and changed. But you cannot change what you cannot see. So let's see it. Here are 7 signs your brain is wired for poverty and what you can do to fix each one right now. Sign 1. You think about money in emergencies, not strategies. Let me paint a picture for you. It's a Tuesday afternoon. You get an unexpected bill in the mail. Maybe it's a car repair, maybe it's a medical bill, maybe it's something with your taxes. And suddenly, money is all you can think about. You're calculating in your head, you're stressed, you're maybe even angry. You're trying to figure out how to cover this. You're thinking about which credit card has space. You're wondering if you can borrow from someone. For the next few days, money consumes your thoughts. And then you solve the problem. You cover the bill somehow. The crisis passes. And just like that, you stop thinking about money again. Until the next emergency. Sound familiar? If it does, you are not alone. Research shows that the majority of Americans operate in exactly this pattern, what behavioral economists call reactive financial thinking. And here's why this is a sign of poverty wiring. Wealthy people think about money proactively, constantly, not in a stressful way, but in a strategic way. They are always thinking about their money, even when there is no crisis, where it's going, where it's growing, what it's doing, how it's working. People with poverty wiring only engage with money when forced to. Think about what this creates over time. When you only think about money during emergencies, you never build the skills, the habits, or the systems that create actual wealth. You become incredibly good at surviving financial crises and completely unskilled at building financial momentum. It's like only going to the gym when your doctor tells you that your health is in danger.
You'll never build real strength. You'll only ever be managing damage. And here's the psychological reason this happens.
For many people, money is emotionally painful to think about. It triggers feelings of shame, inadequacy, fear, or overwhelm. So the brain does what brains do. It avoids the source of pain.
Avoidance feels like relief in the short term, but it is devastatingly expensive in the long term. Dr. Shlomo Benartzi, a behavioral economist at UCLA, found that people who avoid thinking about money proactively are 47% less likely to have any retirement savings by the age of 55. Not because they didn't earn enough, because they didn't engage enough. So what's the fix? This is going to sound almost insultingly simple, but simplicity is not the same as easy. Schedule 15 minutes every single week. Not when there's a crisis, not when something goes wrong, just a regular, weekly, 15-minute money date with yourself. You look at your bank account, you look at what came in and what went out, you check your savings, you make one small intentional decision. That's it. 15 minutes a week. It will feel deeply uncomfortable at first, especially if money has been a source of pain for you. But discomfort is the feeling of rewiring. Do it anyway.
Sign 2. You believe rich people are lucky, not skilled. I want you to think about the last time you saw someone financially successful. Maybe it was someone on social media flaunting a new car. Maybe it was a coworker who got a big promotion. Maybe it was a family member who built a successful business. What was your first thought? For people with poverty wiring, the answer is almost always some version of, they got lucky, they had connections, their parents had money, they were in the right place at the right time. It must be nice. Now, I'm not saying wealthy people are all self-made paragons of virtue. Some of them did get lucky. Some of them did have unfair advantages. But here's what the research actually shows. A study by Thomas Corley, who spent 5 years interviewing both wealthy and poor individuals, found that 88% of wealthy people attributed their financial success primarily to their own habits and decisions, while 79% of people who struggled financially attributed their situation primarily to luck, circumstances, or factors outside their control. This is not just an attitude difference. This is a fundamental difference in how the brain processes agency, your ability to control outcomes in your life. When you believe that financial success is primarily about luck or circumstances, your brain stops looking for actions you can take to improve your situation. Why would it? If the outcome is determined by luck, there's nothing useful to do except hope. But when your brain believes that your decisions and actions genuinely influence your financial outcomes, even imperfectly, even partially, it becomes a completely different problem-solving machine. Psychologists call this the difference between an internal locus of control and an external locus of control. And decades of research consistently show that people with an internal locus of control, people who believe they influence their outcomes, significantly outperform on almost every financial metric. Now, here's the part that's going to sting a little. This belief, the luck belief, is often a defense mechanism. If success is about luck, then failure isn't your fault. And if failure isn't your fault, you don't have to feel ashamed of it.
I understand that. I genuinely do. Shame is one of the most painful human emotions, and the mind will do almost anything to protect you from it. But the protection is costing you your future. Here's the fix. Start keeping what I call a decision journal. Every week, write down one financial decision you made and what the result was. Not just outcomes, decisions. The goal is to start building evidence that your choices actually matter, that your actions have consequences, positive and negative. Over time, this rewires your brain's relationship with agency. It starts seeing connections between what you do and what happens to you. And that shift, that small, quiet shift in perception, is one of the most powerful financial upgrades a human brain can make.
Sign 3. You're comfortable being uncomfortable with money. This one is subtle, and it might be the most important one on this list. There is a certain kind of financial discomfort that becomes normal. Not painful enough to force change, but constant enough to become background noise. The credit card balance that's been sitting there for 2 years. The savings account that never seems to grow. The paycheck-to-paycheck cycle that you've been in so long, it just feels like that's how life works. You're not in a crisis, but you're not thriving either. You are comfortable being uncomfortable. And your brain has accepted this as the baseline. This is one of the most dangerous signs of poverty wiring because it removes urgency. And without urgency, there is no change.
Here's the neuroscience behind it. Your brain has a concept called a financial comfort zone, a range of financial circumstances that feel familiar and therefore safe. This is set largely by your childhood experiences with money. If you grew up in a household where money was always tight, your brain learned that financial struggle is normal. It's familiar. It's safe in the sense that it's what you know. Actual financial comfort, a growing savings account, no credit card debt, real financial margin, can feel deeply unfamiliar, almost threatening. The brain experiences it as uncertainty, and the brain hates uncertainty more than it hates discomfort.
This is why so many people who receive windfalls, tax refunds, inheritances, bonuses, unconsciously spend them back to zero. Not because they're irresponsible, because their brain is restoring the familiar. Researchers call this the financial set point. And just like a thermostat, your brain will keep pulling you back toward whatever temperature it considers normal until you manually reset the thermostat. How do you reset it? Gradual, evidence-based expansion. You do not fix this by forcing yourself to think big overnight. You fix it by consistently expanding your financial reference points, small amounts at a time.
Open a savings account and put $20 in it. Leave it there. Let your brain get used to having $20 in savings, then $30, then $50. The goal is not the amount. The goal is updating your brain's definition of normal. Every time you successfully maintain a new financial behavior for 30 days, your brain recalibrates. It starts treating that new level as the baseline. Small, consistent, expanding. That is how you reset a poverty set point.
Sign 4. You use money to feel better right now.
I need you to think about the last time you made a purchase that you later regretted. Not a big purchase necessarily. Maybe it was an online order at midnight. Maybe it was a takeout meal when you knew you had food at home. Maybe it was a subscription you didn't need. Maybe it was something you bought just because it was on sale. What were you feeling right before you made that purchase? If you're honest, the answer is probably one of these: stressed, bored, sad, lonely, anxious, overwhelmed. This is called emotional spending, and it is one of the most reliable signs of poverty wiring.
Here's what's happening in the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the rational, long-term thinking part of your brain, is essentially offline when you're experiencing negative emotions. The emotional brain takes over. And the emotional brain is not thinking about your savings goals or your budget. It is thinking about feeling better right now. A purchase, even a small one, triggers a dopamine release. That's real. It genuinely does feel better in the moment. Your brain is not wrong about that. The problem is that the relief lasts about 4 to 6 hours, and then you're left with the original emotion, plus guilt, plus a slightly smaller bank account.
Do this enough times, and you've created a pattern. Negative emotion, spend, temporary relief, guilt, negative emotion, spend. Researchers at the University of Michigan found that people who use spending as an emotional regulation strategy spend an average of $4,000 more per year than people who don't, without any corresponding increase in long-term happiness or well-being. $4,000 a year. Every year. That's the price of emotional spending. Now, here's what wealthy people do differently. And it's not that they don't feel negative emotions. Of course they do. The difference is they've developed what psychologists call alternative emotional regulation strategies. When they feel stressed, they go for a run. When they feel anxious, they call someone. When they feel bored, they read. They've essentially installed different software for processing difficult emotions. Software that doesn't cost them money. The fix here is not willpower. Willpower doesn't work against the emotional brain. The fix is pattern interruption.
When you feel the urge to spend coming on, you insert a delay. You tell yourself, I will decide about this purchase in 24 hours. Write it down. Set a reminder. What you'll find is that about 70% of the time, the urge disappears completely when the emotion passes. The thing you desperately needed at 10 p.m. on Tuesday seems completely unnecessary on Wednesday morning.
The remaining 30%, the things you still want after 24 hours, those are probably real purchases. Go ahead and make them. But that 70% you didn't buy, that's your money, back in your account, building your future instead of managing your emotions.
Sign 5. You think in prices, not in values. Let me ask you something that seems simple, but isn't. What do you think is more expensive? A $6 daily latte habit or a $12 per month gym membership? Most people will immediately say the latte. And mathematically, they're right in the short term. $6 a day adds up to $180 a month versus $12. But here's a different way to think about it. The person who is physically fit because they use their gym membership may cost their insurance company and themselves dramatically less in healthcare over their lifetime. They may have more energy, be more productive, and earn more over their career. The $12 a month might be one of the best investments they ever make.
The latte? It provides about 20 minutes of enjoyment and a caffeine hit. It produces nothing beyond that. The difference between these two ways of looking at a purchase, price versus value, is one of the clearest dividing lines between wealthy thinking and poverty thinking. People with poverty wiring are trained to think almost exclusively in terms of price. How much does it cost? Is it on sale? Can I get it cheaper? People with wealthy wiring think primarily in terms of value. What does this do for me? What does this produce? What is the return? This is not about being extravagant. You can think in value and still be very frugal. In fact, value thinking often leads to spending less because you realize most cheap purchases produce almost nothing. Thomas Stanley, who wrote The Millionaire Next Door after studying actual millionaires for decades, found that the wealthy are consistently willing to pay more for things that produce more. Quality tools, education, health investments, experiences that produce learning or relationships, and consistently unwilling to pay for things that only provide momentary pleasure. Poverty wiring flips this. It pays a lot for things that feel good in the moment and cuts costs on things that actually produce results. Here's a quick exercise to start shifting this. For the next 2 weeks, every time you're about to spend money, whether it's $5 or $500, ask yourself one question. What will this purchase produce? Not what will it feel like? Not is it a good deal? What will it produce? If you can't answer that question, pause before buying. It sounds almost too simple, but consistently asking, what will this produce, starts rewiring how your brain categorizes purchases. Over time, you stop seeing money as something you exchange for things and start seeing it as something you exchange for outcomes. That one shift changes everything.
Sign 6. You're afraid to talk about money. Quick question. In the last year, have you had an open, honest conversation with someone you trust about your actual financial situation? Your real numbers, your real fears, your real goals? For most people, the answer is no, and that silence is costing them. Money is the most taboo topic in American culture. We'll talk about our health problems, our relationship struggles, our personal failures, but our bank account balance? Absolutely not. This financial silence is a form of poverty wiring, and it manifests in several ways.
You don't negotiate your salary because talking about money feels uncomfortable and presumptuous. You don't ask questions when you're confused about financial products because admitting you don't understand feels embarrassing. You don't seek help when you're struggling because financial struggle feels like a character flaw you need to hide. The cost of this silence is enormous. Research from Carnegie Mellon University found that employees who negotiate their starting salary earn an average of $1 million more over their careers than those who accept the first offer. One conversation, $1 million. People who work with financial advisors or coaches, even basic ones,
consistently build more wealth than those who try to figure everything out alone. The connection between your willingness to talk about money and your financial outcomes is direct and well documented. Wealthy families talk about money openly. They discuss budgets, investments, and financial goals at the dinner table, not in an obsessive way, in a normal, practical way. Many people who struggle financially grew up in households where money was either a shameful secret or a source of constant conflict. So they learned that talking about money causes pain, and now they avoid it.
Here's the fix, and it's a small one. Find one person, one trusted person, and have one honest financial conversation in the next 30 days. Not a perfect conversation, not a comprehensive financial review, just honest. Tell them something real, your savings goal, a financial worry, something you're trying to figure out. Break the silence once, and the second time becomes easier, and the third time, easier still. Financial isolation is expensive. Financial community, even small, imperfect community, pays.
Sign 7. You have a complicated relationship with your own success. This is the deepest one. And for many people, this is the one that does the most invisible damage. I want you to think about the last time something genuinely good happened to you financially. A raise, a bonus, a moment where you were actually doing well. What came up? For many people, more than you might expect, something uncomfortable surfaces when financial success appears. Guilt, imposter syndrome, a sense that it won't last, a feeling that you don't quite deserve it, an unconscious urge to give it all away or spend it before it disappears. This is what psychologists call self-sabotage, and it is devastating to long-term wealth building. It often comes from one of several sources. Some people grew up in environments where having more than others created conflict or guilt. If your family struggled and you start to succeed, you might unconsciously pull back to avoid the discomfort of being different, of being the one who made it. Some people received direct messages in childhood that money was dangerous, corrupting, or only for certain kinds of people, not for people like us. Rich people are greedy. Money changes you. These messages become deeply embedded beliefs that quietly undermine financial success. Some people experience what therapists call upper limiting, a concept developed by psychologist Gay Hendricks. Every time their success reaches a certain level, they unconsciously create a problem that brings them back down. A bad investment, an impulsive purchase, a conflict that disrupts a financial opportunity. The pattern is not random. The brain is doing it deliberately, protecting the person from the perceived danger of too much success. And here's what makes this sign particularly powerful and particularly difficult to address. It operates almost entirely below the level of conscious awareness. You don't decide to sabotage yourself. It just happens again and again, and you wonder why. So, how do you fix something you can't see? You start by noticing the pattern. Get a journal. Think about the last 3 times something financially positive was in your reach and didn't happen. Write them down. Be honest with yourself about what your role was in the outcome. Were you actually unlucky, or did you make a choice, consciously or not, that pulled you back? This is not about blame. It is about pattern recognition. The second step is to examine your inherited beliefs about wealthy people and money. What did you hear growing up? What did you absorb? Write those down too. Because the beliefs you carry about what money means, who deserves it, and what happens to people who have it, those beliefs are running your financial life like an operating system you never chose to install. And unlike a real operating system, you can uninstall them. Not overnight, not by reading one book or watching one video, but through consistent, honest, intentional self-examination. And ideally through working with a therapist or coach who specializes in financial psychology. The brain that held you back is the same brain that can set you free. It just needs different programming. Let me bring this together. 7 signs that your brain may be wired for poverty. 1. You only think about money during emergencies, not strategically. 2. You believe financial success is primarily about luck, not decisions. 3.
You've become comfortable with financial discomfort. It's your normal. 4. You use spending to regulate your emotions rather than to build your future. 5. You think in prices, not in value, and it's costing you more than you know. 6. You're afraid to talk about money honestly, and that silence is isolating you from help and opportunity.
And 7, you have a complicated, conflicted relationship with your own financial success, and you may be sabotaging yourself without realizing it. Now, I want to say something important. If you recognized yourself in some of these signs, maybe even most of them, I don't want you to walk away from this video feeling worse about yourself. I want you to walk away feeling something else entirely. I want you to feel clarity. Because here's the truth. You cannot fix a problem you haven't identified. And now you have identified it.
That's not a reason to feel ashamed. That's a reason to feel equipped. Every single one of these signs, every single one of these patterns can be changed. Not easily, not overnight, but systematically, intentionally, and permanently. The brain is not a fixed thing. The research on neuroplasticity is clear. New patterns, new habits, new beliefs can be installed at any age, in any circumstances. The only thing standing between the brain you have and the brain you want is conscious, consistent effort over time. And that effort starts today. Not Monday, not next month, today.
Pick the one sign from this list that resonated most, the one you felt in your gut when you heard it. Write it down and ask yourself one question. What is one small thing I can do this week to begin addressing this pattern? Not everything, one thing. Because that's how rewiring works. Not in one dramatic moment of change, but in one small, consistent action, repeated until it becomes automatic, then replaced by another small action and another. The brain that built the patterns that are holding you back is the exact same brain that can build the patterns that set you free. You just have to give it new instructions.
I believe you can do that. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop in the comments, which of these 7 signs felt most personal to you? Which one did you recognize in yourself? I read every comment, and your honesty in those comments doesn't just help you. It helps every other person who reads them and realizes they're not alone. If this video gave you something useful today, a new way of seeing yourself, a new question to sit with, a new tool to try, please give it a thumbs up. It helps more people find this content. And this is exactly the kind of conversation I think more people need to be having.
Subscribe if you haven't already, because we go deep on this stuff every single week. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of your mind, because that is where every financial outcome begins.